Hello and welcome to Conversations with Esther. Today, the 15th of November, 2023. Now, as is our custom, Terry. I see Terry tuned in the house. Hi, Terry. Terry, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good evening, Esther.
Good evening to you, my dear. You can pray for us kindly as we begin.
Sure.
Thank
Sure,
you.
let's pray. Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, we want to thank you. We praise you, Lord. We honor you, Father, for this far you have brought us in this day of the 15th November 2023. Thank you for this session tonight of Conversations with Esther. Thank you for the facilitator, Eve. Oh God, we ask, Lord, that you would take over this session. Thank you for everyone that is here and everyone that will join. We just cover it with the blood of Jesus, and we thank you for the learning, and we thank you for the takeaways that we'll have at the end of the meeting. And we thank you for the impact, oh God, in our lives and even in our organizations. Father, take the glory and take the honor. In Jesus' name we pray and believe. Amen.
Amen. Amen. And thank you. Thank you, Terry. Now, I would like to just introduce Conversations with Esther, and especially for those that could be joining us for the first time. Conversations with Esther is an impact-driven media platform that informs, educates, rebuilds mindsets, and to ignite ethical practices within organizations and the community. And I want to say this, that we are now beyond the media platform. We are doing trainings. We are having conversations with the organization. We are speaking to top leadership on matters of the workplace and mental health. So we are growing super fast, and Conversations with Esther actually just hit 1 year. So we are celebrating our 1 year and the impact in that 1 year. So Conversations with Esther provides a professional safe space speaking to matters affecting the workplace, social circles, and overall mental wellness. Guided by our 3 values: integrity, excellence, and impact, Conversations with Esther envisions a world transformed by candid conversations, respectable relationships, and the goodwill to make every effort count. So we bring you on board, we bring everyone else on board, we bring your leaders on board and your team members on board, that we can transform the world. Now you can subscribe to our YouTube, Conversations with Esther Katiba. Follow me on LinkedIn, Esther Katiba, and you can as well go to our Instagram, Conversations with Esther. To join our community, we have a WhatsApp group. You can scan that in 1 minute. Join our community that you can get, so that you can get weekly updates, sessions, training, and other events happening, and that we can keep exchanging ideas. If you can scan that, I'll just give you a few seconds for that, or I'll share that link in the chat later. Now, today we're talking about preparing for end-of-year performance appraisals. And if you saw the post carried a message asking, are you ready? End-of-year appraisals can often feel like unnecessary evil. Are you nervously counting down the days, or are you looking forward to it? And I'm aware we have HR leaders here. Terry is one of them. Eve, of course, our guest, and many others. I hope your teams are ready. Whatever the feeling, it's important to properly prepare beforehand by gathering your evidence, highlighting your achievements, and preparing for any questions that may arise. And that is why we have Eve Mutio in the house today. Now, allow me to introduce Eve. Eve Mutio is a strategic and innovative people and culture expert, offering over a decade of progressive experience in diverse industries, including manufacturing, hospitality, donor-funded, and renewable energy. She translates business vision into human capital initiatives that improve performance, profitability, growth, and employee engagement. empowering trusted leaders who supports companies and top executives with a unique perspective and appreciation that human capital is in every organization's greatest asset, a genuine influencer who thrives on agility and translates visions and strategies into actionable value-added goals. She has a huge, huge profile. Allow me to just read that, and I stop sharing to bring in our special guest, Eve Mutio, a very good friend of mine, professional, and I know we have the right person in the room. Karibu sana, Eve. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you for the platform. I think, Esther, you've actually mentioned about the roles I play in society, but most importantly, I usually like referring myself as a child of God. That's who I am. Performance review, and just to kickstart this, performance review is an area that is very, very close to my heart. And I believe any HR in the room knows that that's the cornerstone that drives organizations. That's where actually the value can be felt, because if you're not assessing performance, then what you're doing, you're assessing failures. So for this today, we are going to really focus on now you've been reviewed. And I'll tell you that each and every person in an organization, they are actually reviewed. And I'll start by sharing my screen so that we can have this conversation in depth. And probably also open for questions after I'm done. So in context, so let me just so in context, when nobody in an organization is not, each and every person in an organization is reviewed from the board level to the most junior, most position. The CEO is reviewed by the board. The board is reviewed by the shareholders, because they also want to see the investments that we've made, is there an ROI? The senior management is reviewed by the CEO. So everyone in the organization is reviewed. And when you're looking at performance management, there are always key aspects that you have to look at. There's the person giving the review, and there's also the person who's receiving it. And when you're looking at it, what exactly does happen during a performance review? It's you're being assessed. You're also getting feedback. There's also the aspect of goal setting. And when you look at organizations, how they conduct performance review, especially when you're looking at appraisals, there are organizations that will conduct performance review probably twice a year. Others will conduct performance review or other appraisals maybe 3 times a year. That is probably quarterly. 4 times, that's quarterly. And also there are organizations which actually believe that performance review is a continuous journey. Feedback is given every day on your work. So it depends with each organization that you work for. So, and during this time of the performance review, there's the aspect of goal setting. You'll find that there are organizations that will focus on, probably there's 2 key objectives that you have to really focus on during that time before the next review. That's the sit down, the formal one, and of course not forgetting the informal one, where there are check-ins and also to see how someone is really doing in their role. And as I said, as the goal settings that are being set, remember they also align to the entire vision of the organization, the entire strategy of the organization. Then in terms of those goal setting, you look at their also development plans, like what are the areas that one needs to develop on, or what are you looking at focusing on when it comes to your development needs. And I won't get into the nitty-gritty, because when you look at performance review, we have various types of performance review. We have various systems in terms of performance review. We can look at 360, we have goals objective, we have competence-based. The list is endless depending on which organization you work for. And when you look at the key components of a performance management, in terms of now the person giving now the review, is that I think I've talked about goal setting, I've talked about regular feedback, I've talked about development planning. That is coming now to the line manager, and there's also the performance evaluation, and also from the manager side or the person who's doing the review, there's also the aspect of reward and recognition. Like, if you do this, what will happen depending on the philosophy of your organization. So now, I think when when you look at a performance review, because today we are focusing on now the person who's been reviewed, I think it's very, very important to contextualize what exactly it means. What are the stakes? Because when a performance review is happening or an appraisal review is happening, this is actually the opportunity that you have to look at it. It's an opportunity for professional growth. Probably it's a promotion. Probably is your role being expanded. Probably is you've just gotten a contract and you've just been onboarded in an organization. And that time, probably you're being reviewed for your probation review. So there's a lot at stake. So you have to really think about that in terms of the person being reviewed. And I've also mentioned here in terms of there's also the aspect of building your brand visibility in the organization when that performance review. So those are the stakes. When you look at it holistically. And the other aspect I've also not mentioned here, we are looking at even bonuses. For instance, it's the end of the year, and probably that performance review will determine whether you're going to get a bonus or not. And also, during a performance review or an appraisal process, probably you've been put through a performance improvement plan. And probably that time it's going to determine whether you are a fit in terms of the role, in terms of your capability in that organization or not. So the stakes are quite high. And when you're going to that review, you really need to remember that. The other thing is also the person who's actually reviewing that. I mean, the dynamics. If at all you're like, let me give an example. If, for instance, you're being reviewed by, let's say, a CEO, or you're being reviewed by the HR manager or the head of customer, what are the stakes? What do they have their hands? Because you have to look at the dynamics. Like the person who's doing your review, they have the power to either, they have actually the power in terms of your career advancement, because I keep on telling most people that most of our career decisions, whether to be promoted, whether to get a review, whether to get hired, are actually made in our absence. And the people who are making those decisions are actually behind the scenes. So, like, for instance, if you're professional, in terms of the person who's reviewing you, in terms of that, probably they have a say in you being promoted, in you getting another position in terms of expansion or responsibility. They have a decision making. Like the body, when the body is reviewing the CEO, they have the decision to either retain that CEO or not. If it's the CEO, they have the mandate to either retain their senior management team or not. And then there's the aspect of approval for budgets. And that's why when we're going to continue with this conversation, you're going to get to see that you can be able to showcase how you manage to the finances in terms of impacting the entire organization in your in either your big or your role that you consider is not making so much contribution. Because remember, each and every person in an organization really does matter. So, and I go to now, it's very, very important to always have a checklist. So, and I mean, I love the poster when it mentioned that it's an unnecessary evil. So how are you able to quantify, like, for instance, assuming your organization just conducts a yearly review, what is now documented just once per year? How are you able, what is really very, very important for you to actually remember that needs to be in your checklist before you go for that meeting? So I'll start by one. So beyond your daily responsibility, you need to ask yourself, what have I accomplished in the last 1 year beyond my daily beyond my daily duties? And I usually say that my philosophy is always that we are hired to solve problems, not just beside the JD. And performance is all about doing what is required of you and a little bit more. So how have you been able to go beyond what is expected for you? And the other one is addressing situation and challenges. How have you managed during that time? So the checklist, like for instance, I'll give an example. Probably there's a project you are part of, whether you are a project officer, a project assistant, a project director. What were the ambiguity you are solving? And you can be able to show those challenges and give quantifiables that can actually elevate you and show you are actually indispensable and you're actually the person who's the right fit for that role. That's very, very crucial. So that when you're coming out of the appraisal, it's not an issue of capability. It's actually what will now your line manager or your line supervisor will be talking about. This is an area that I think she needs to develop, or not because she can't do it, because she doesn't have the capability. I think I mentioned that. And then the other thing, the impact, because remember during the checklist also, the impact when you're working, you're not working alone. You're working with so many other people in that organization. For instance, I remember when I was working with one organization, one of the core values was collaboration. And that was actually intertwined, was actually integrated in our performance review. So yes, you've managed to do this. So have you collaborated? That's so every time I could go for a performance review, then I'll have to make sure that I collaborated with this. These were the stakeholders that were very, very crucial, because this was very, very important in terms of the organization performance review, or rather what we are calling it appraisals. The other one is the contribution and action. I think I've mentioned that in the impact of people. Remember, when you're collaborating with other people, there's also the ripple effect. What specific action did I take to contribute to the organization's success? I'll give you an example. Like one time I had gone for a performance review, and I remember there was an outside responsibility out of my role. One of the things we were to do as an organization was to to relocate some of our staff who are based in Juba during the Juba crisis. And as much as that was not my responsibility, I came in and I actually asked the people who are working, how do I help? And it was part of even providing a way forward in terms of how do we get a chartered flight to make sure that our employees are safe back home. Then during the performance review, I actually mentioned that, and it actually gave me a bonus point in terms of visibility. And it actually was, if anything, I'd actually say that it was one of the core reasons that made me get promoted from that role to another role. The checklist also, which I have not put here, is there is also an action. I think, let me mention this. What were the tangible actions that you took? I think I mentioned that, like what tangible, like specific, be very, very specific. Don't beat around the bush, yeah? The behaviors that you actually demonstrate this time will be very, very crucial, and summarize them in a manner that they can actually be quantifiable. For instance, did you bring in a customer that actually increased your revenue? And it doesn't matter whether you're a sales assistant, you really have the responsibility to make sure that the organization has the entire impact, has an impact in terms of the organization's core objectives. So these are the checklists that you need to have in mind before you go for that review. And something else I've not also put here is also, you have also to be cognizant of, as much as some organizations do not conduct 360 review, and I mean 360 for those who might not be aware of, 360 is where you are actually reviewed or appraised by your direct reports, people who are junior to you, your customers, your seniors, and also your peers. So you also need to be cognizant of the informal review where it's not written on paper, but probably even your boss is asking about you. For instance, I remember this one time I had just started a new role, and what I came to learn is that my boss was asking even other people, how is Eve settling in the new role? I think it was during my probation time. How is Eve, is she able to, has she adapted into the culture? And others gave good feedback. I'll say that for a fact. Others never gave feedback. And you know what my boss told me? Feedback not given is also not feedback, because probably someone is afraid to give feedback that is not really pleasant, or what people term as negative. That's the checklist. So we go to, I'm hoping I'll be done in the few, so how do you summarize the what I've talked about? So now you have the checklist. How do you summarize the entire work powerful and your entire work powerfully and influentially, so that by the time you're out of there, remember, I look at a performance review as someone who's asking to be re-elected in office, and then they have to have tangible events. Think about the elections in the US. When Obama was going back to ask for votes, he had facts. He should have been able to do this. I've brought in Obamacare. I've done this and I've done that. And that was actually a key component that made him go back to office. So the same as a performance review, look at it in the next, what do I want to get out of this review at the end of the day? Yeah, do I want to increase my brand visibility in the organization? Do I want to get a promotion? Do I want to get confirmed? That's and how you do it really does matter. So the first thing is to understanding the context of the review process. You have the checklist. Now you need to understand the context of the review process. And what do I mean by this? The brief, how are performance review conducted in your organization? Are you sent for a performance appraisal form you fill? And then and what is the philosophy in terms of performance review or appraisal in that organization that you work for? So it's really important to understand the entire context, and your role is very critical. Because with this, it will be able to show you what you really need to highlight so that you don't find yourself showing what really doesn't matter in terms of your role. And then you lose the entire bigger picture of the performance review. I think I've talked about that, highlighting the key components and the expectations. For instance, if you had the time that you are setting expectations with your line manager, they were clearly stipulated, then you need to outline what you managed to do in a little bit more. I can't emphasize that more than enough. Yeah. So yes, I think aligning your achievements with the overarching goals of the meeting. So when you're going for that meeting, what does your boss want to hear in terms of what you had set out together? So that's very critical. And I've seen most of the time we find ourselves in a lot of problems when you're going for a performance review, because what you've highlighted really, your boss really doesn't care. And remember, as I said, he's the influence in terms of what really is dear to you when it comes to your role in that organization. Contribution, and then the other aspect in terms when you've understood the context, you really need to be clear in terms of contributing highlights. You showcase the accomplishment that went beyond your immediate role. I think I've mentioned that we are hired to do a certain job and a little bit more, and that's why you hear someone is talent because they went beyond what is expected for them. And that's where now you become valuable to the organization. And that's now when during the performance review, you can actually showcase that. There are very many examples. And I'd like you to actually reflect. Think of a time at a point whereby you really solved a problem for the organization that would have costed them a lot, and you came in as the knight in shining armor. I believe you have so many examples, even when we are almost coming to the end of review, because I know most of the reviews will be happening based on your end of year financial year. Probably your financial year is in December, others their financial year is the mid-year, depending on where it is. Then when you're looking at the contribution, as I said, you have to have a second degree effect. When you're highlighting that, you highlight instances where your contribution had direct, indirect, but significant impact. What I've mentioned to you, like for instance, as much as I was not part of the role of evacuating our staff, some of our staff who had been stranded in Juba, I actually showcased that I was part of it, and this is the role I played. As much as it was not part of my daily role, it had a contribution to the organization, because it meant that if we evacuate our staff safely and sound to their home countries, we would have actually maintained our brand equity as an organization. The core impact was seen that the organization actually really does care for the staff, and that meant that every life was saved. So there was a big impact. That was done indirectly, as much as I was quite a junior person in the organization. Then, of course, look at the revenue. What really does matter in the organization for you, in terms of what really makes the organization tick? What do they value? Do they value revenue in terms of, and how do you see your role contributing to revenue, to profits, and also the aspect of productivity, and quantify them? Like, for instance, I remember when I remember when I was working for one organization, one of the key things that I managed to do was to start an internship program, because the key problem for that organization, we were losing talent. And I told myself, I think this is actually costing money to the organization, because we have to hire. It means we have to hire headhunters. And what is that doing to our business and to our bottom line? And I highlighted that. In terms of revenue, if your organization, they're very keen to revenue. For instance, you've brought in a new client, be very specific. This has actually contributed to the revenues of to the profits of the organization. And some people, and you'll be surprised, even if you are at what level, your role is impacting to that. Because if you are not impacting to the entire objective of the organization, then you would have not been hired in the first place. I think I've talked about the providing tangible example. I don't think I need to go about that in terms of now when you're having the conversation. I've talked about the influence, if at all it's really, this I haven't mentioned. The other thing is, when what really matters is, does your organization value relationships? I remember there's one contract I actually signed, and one of the clauses actually was saying that it's your responsibility to ensure that you have a conducive relationship with your colleagues. And remember, if it's put there, then it means it's reviewed. Either it's not, either informally or formally. So you'll hear people ask, how does this person get along with other people? How does he or she keeps on stepping on people's toe to get to the result? Because probably he might be a very exceptional performer, but you're just rubbing people's heads and really making everyone really uncomfortable. Remember, that is also part of the process in terms of your review. So really need to understand that when you're preparing for your review and how you can bring out that. Role connection, I think whatever you would remember, there's still what you are hired for. Everything has to align with what you're doing, so that actually when you're connecting those dots, it brings out your value proposition and the fact that you're indispensable and how much you're telling, so that you're not seen as someone who's very, you are doing a lot for the organization, but you're also forgetting what you are hired to do, because that also will apply in your review. All right. So there are various challenges in terms of navigating. The other aspect is navigating challenges, progress, and contribution. So, of course, during the year when you are actually executing your role in your areas of jurisdiction, it's very normal that there were actually challenges that you went through. I mean, it's very, very important to point them out. And how you identify and you see how were you able to navigate and provide those challenges. Or are you the person during a review, you only point out problems, and then what happens to your line managers? They just see you as this is a person who just brings problems and they never provide solutions. What is work in progress, and what have you been able to be very, very specific? Looping your challenges as contributions, show that yes, there's been this challenge, and you can give very, very tangible example. We will not go so much into it. Then also, this is something also very, very close to my heart, continuous improvement, meaning always learning every day. How are you continuously improving yourself? Or do you think that you have reached that you are not you're not always developing yourself in terms of improvement, your work design, the way you work, the way you, because I think that may be pointed out by your line managers, but remember here it's more on you. Here also, let's talk about this. Point number 4 is current status, master your role and strategic alignment. And I keep on saying strategy is not just for the senior people, strategy is for each and every person. So responsibility, clearly outline your current responsibility within the organization and be very, very clear in terms of how that role is contributing to the entire existence of that organization. Their key performance, I think I'll go fast in this because I feel like I'm also repeating on this. Key performance indicators, present KPIs that reflect your performance, tangible, be very, 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 very specific, and probably these KPIs had been set even before you started your role at the beginning of the year, whether you're on probation, because also there's a reason why people are given KPIs to really show what they managed to do. Then feedback. I think this is another aspect that really people really mess up on, especially when we are looking at being given feedback. Feedback is very crucial in terms of when you're receiving feedback. So when you're going, remember their power dynamics, yeah? We can never forget about that. So you have to be cognizant on the feedback you're being given. So how do you take feedback? Because feedback is a breakfast for champion, and feedback makes us grow. And every day is the only way that is gonna make us grow, because you have blind spots, there are areas probably we feel you're doing very, very well, and there are always areas for improvement every day. So when now your line manager is probably pointing out the areas in terms of you really need to improve on, you really need to be very, 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 very attentive. Be very open to the feedback. Resist the urge to become defensive. You know, sometimes you're given feedback, but you're always giving, you're not even listening what is being said. You are just waiting for the person to continue speaking, and then you're hearing, but you're not listening. So what happens is that you leave out that room either very distressed because it becomes a defensive match, and you actually miss you miss the whole point. Yeah. So be very, very open and avoid being defensive. I've talked about listening actively. I think I've mentioned about that. If there are questions, if there's feedback that you feel is not very clear, it's very, very important to ask for clarification, so that by the time we are now going to action, because after that appraisal, probably you're going to be setting the goals for the next year or the next quarter. I mean, depending on your organization. So ask the question. And again, focus on the behavior, because at times the appraisals can also be someone is attacking you as a person. You need to be very clear in terms of, it needs to be very, very clear in terms of the behavior. It's the behavior, it's not the person. Yeah. And express gratitude. I mean, thank you for the feedback. I will work on that. Thank you. Even probably something being pointed out, and probably in your previous appraisal, probably it was pointed out that you probably share reports late. You can actually give you say thank you for this feedback, because actually nowadays, even during our last review, you mentioned this, and you notice I've actually improved on that. Yeah, and actually show gratitude. And every time before you actually respond, it's very, very important to reflect. What exactly is this person saying? Because as I said, when you find yourself speaking and you've not even understood what is being asked or what is being said, then it beats logic for the whole performance review to happen. Focus on improvement. I think I've mentioned that. I've also talked about when even you're being given feedback, for instance, like at this point, you come to work to the office late. Yeah, you have a perpetual habit of coming to office late, or rather your reports are really not well thought through. So let the person be specific. You can even ask for example. Like, for example, I remember that there's one review I'd gone for, and my boss said that Eve, you're he used to call HR heart and rationale. I think I'll never forget that. And I told him, you so much, if you're so much heart and rationale and you forget the business. And I told him, please give me examples. I really need to understand what exactly you're saying. And he said, when you're going for the board meeting, what happens is that you give feelings, you say that people have to go for leave, or rather, I think it's important to hire a learning and development or a diversity and inclusion manager because it's good for the organization. Yet the people I'm speaking in the board understand the language of business, the language of numbers. And with that, my conversation actually changed every time I used to go for board meeting, because I was like, if I'm speaking to that board member, he will resonate more on the legal aspect. If I'm speaking to that, and wholesomely, I have to look at the impact of the business, because that's feedback that was shared and it was very, very specific. Follow-up. I mean, after the feedback, you need to really, really do follow-up, because with following up, it will make you understand, have you gotten it right? Have you still doing, are you still showing, are you still behaving the same way you're behaving in terms of your behaviors that are required for your role? That follow-up is very, very important, because it makes us grow. Yeah. Then action plan. After the performance review, it's very, very, very important, because after the performance review or during the performance review, there must be a clear action plan. And an action plan, I look at it as a way of, let me just see, the why, what, how, when. So the action plan, why are we doing what we are supposed to do in terms of your role, in terms of your objectives? The why will really provide a clear picture on what you're supposed to do and how much value you're adding in whatever you're doing. The what, the why, the what. Now the clear objectives, the what. We'll work on this. And for instance, we will follow up with, we'll bring more revenue to the organization because we want our why is to continue to increase market share. That's the bigger picture of the organization. The how, who are the stakeholders, who are the people you have to collaborate with, that's very clear. By when, because it's very specific. And also, it's very important when you're looking at the action plan to align with your boss's expectations. Remember, what people don't understand is that your line managers, let me tell you, your line managers, your role really impacts on their success. So if at all you fail, they are also failing, and it becomes a ripple effect to the entire organization. So it's very important to understand what really is a key priority for your boss, and then that becomes a priority even for you. For now, your action plan for the next review. So for managers, I think this one was not part of it, but I don't know whether Esther Esther will share this. Anyway, she'll advise. I think I wouldn't mention this because it was not part of this. For today, we were purely focusing on now us being reviewed, and everyone is reviewed. And I think these tips recognize the potential of different viewpoints of self-assessment. It's very important. And managerial feedback, I think I've said I'm not gonna mention. I think this one we can read for ourselves because this is now focusing on the manager. And yeah, thank you. That's all for me. And I don't know whether there are any questions that one would want to ask. Yeah. Back to you, Esther. I think we are still on time. No, we have really quite taken a lot of time. Esther, back to you. Esther, are you still there?
Yes, I am, Eve, and I had requested you to share that one on managers. Please do. We have managers in the room, kindly.
All right, no problem. Okay, sawa. No problem. I will do that. Let me do that. Let me share about that, because managers are really the people who also, because as much as they are being reviewed, let me just see. I don't know why it's not moving out. Yeah, for managers, those who are giving feedback, it's important to prepare well. And I usually say that you are as strong as your strongest link, or you are as weak as your weakest link. I don't know how that saying goes. I hope I have actually pronounced it. Like, most of the results that we achieve as line managers or as leaders, 60% is achieved by our direct reports. Like, just imagine if at all you didn't have a team, you'd actually be overwhelmed. So it's very important to remember that during a review. And also remember that you're also dealing with human beings. Because at times I've gone for performance review where I have had to intervene because a line manager was very nasty and was also just attacking someone. So we have to be cognizant of that. So as a manager, it's very important to prepare well in advance. What do you want to get out of this meeting? Remember your role. You are actually you're actually the stepping stone of this, your direct reports in terms of their career. You are the person who's going to approve budgets. You are the person who's going to actually negotiate for them behind closed doors. So what are the expectations? So you need to be very clear in terms of that. So you need to prepare well in advance, and you know that when I'm going to this review, this is what I want it to come out of it. It's a win-win, so that we don't find ourselves as line managers or as line managers coming out of the performance review with no impact. And we are leaders, not only bosses. So you need to have provided clear expectations. You clearly communicate, give examples. Give examples. As I have mentioned to you, there's a time that when my boss told me about your so much heart and rationale, this is feedback he had been given by the chairman, and that was affecting his role. And him giving me the feedback also made his work easier, because it's like, okay, you have a team actually is really supporting the vision of the organization. Balance your feedback and be very, very specific when it comes to behaviors. Balance your feedback. It has to be very, very balanced. And I'm not talking about the sandwich feedback. No. Balancing your feedback is understanding your team in terms of the kind of personalities are in your team. If at all you have someone who has a very, very strong personality, I think just the other day we actually read a books in terms of, surrounded by idioms. We have a red is very goal-oriented. So when you're giving a red, or rather you're giving someone who's very goal-oriented, or someone I'd call a choleric, how do you give feedback to them, and how do they look at things? Balance that feedback so that you don't wound someone for life until they feel like they don't really matter. Highlight both their strengths and their areas of development. And even those areas of development, you can even give an example. You can actually tell them, I've seen that you really struggled well in data. Probably we can I'd actually advise you consider a course in data analytics, because it will make you present your report in a manner that is very, very understandable, and it's communicating to the people who are consuming the reports. Give a balanced feedback. Yeah, goal setting for the future. Of course, we have done these goals. What has not been achieved? What needs to be achieved? Collaboratively set the goal so that it doesn't become a tell conversation. And remember, here there's always that dynamic, because during this conversation, sometimes someone might actually be saying, I hear you, I understand you. And in their head, they're like, I wish this review will just end because I've just had enough of being put down during this review. Development of opportunities, I actually have mentioned in terms of that. You are the people to guide someone in terms of their development. And how you do it will really matter and will determine how they actually are going to move on forward. Be open to employee input. As I said, it's not a match between the two of you. It's not I tell you and you take it. No, be open. How do you think we can do this? And you'll be surprised. Actually, during a review, you'll be surprised that our direct reports might be knowing the space more than you do. I'm just giving an example. Let me give an example. For instance, in your team, you're let me give an example. You're probably let me say, probably you're the head of communications, and probably you've been in the role for over 10 years, or you understand the dynamics of communications. And probably in that same team, you have a Gen Z who understand probably a target market you've not reached out to. And probably one of the key goals is to say we need to reach a wider audience when it comes to maybe social media. That Gen Z probably has tips you actually are not aware of. And you'll find that they'll add more value when it's more collaboratively, and there's an aspect of collaboration for both of you. Right. And so the tips, when you're assessing, recognize the potential of different viewpoints between self-assessment and managerial feedback. Remember, you are the manager, so you have to look at viewpoints. Remember, this employee also is a bit nervous, because probably, will I lose my job? Will I get a promotion? How will my brand? I mean, this person is going to be in conversation regarding my career. I'm not there. So you really need to be cognizant about that. Ensure your documents and data align seamlessly with the meeting. So be very clear. I mean, that's in terms of that you tailor your presentation or the conversation to clear data that aligns to the role, not about someone's how they look and all that kind of thing. That really doesn't matter. You really need to focus on what someone does and how well they can develop. Clearly articulate the unique value you bring to the team and organization, and how your skills can make you indispensable to the overall. Now I'm talking about the people being reviewed. And also it's even as line manager, just tell them, you mean this is a value you bring to the team. You did quite a good work. You saved us out of this. I remember there's one time when I used to be a HRO, I used to work for an organization that had problems with the tax cargo. They were actually transporting some of their products from different countries, and some of the products that were actually worth of billions were actually had been actually be confiscated in Kenya. And I told them, and one of the airline, I knew someone, and I just as HR, and I went, I think I can give you a link of someone who can actually help you on this. The CEO for that company came and you did a good job, and it actually motivated. I was like, okay, I'm actually contributing. That's a manager coming and recognizing, wow. And those goods had actually been confiscated for like quite a long time, and it was actually making the company lose money. Avoid isolation, your influence to immediate tasks. Illustrate the ripple effect. I think I've mentioned about that. Even also as a manager, you also have that. You have the power to build someone, or you have the power to kill someone. Let someone not ever say that this performance review was so bad that to an extent, the next thing now you're now dealing with issues to do with that resignation from someone, and you've lost it. It's just because you did not balance your responsibility as a line manager when you're appraising, and also being cognizant of the other person. Exercise patience and refrain from initiating the conversation. Prioritize an activity. I think I've mentioned about this. This is for both parties, and I think I am done. Yes.
Wow. Thank you, Eve. I want to look at the questions. I saw 1 or 2 questions. Possibly on the chat in a minute. Yeah, I saw one. Let me get it for you. What's the best way to introduce an appraisal system in an organization?
Okay. Maybe what needs to be clear is also whether is there an existing appraisal system, and I look at it as a performance management system because it's very holistically. When you're introducing the performance management system, and I'm looking at it holistically from the high terms of evaluating the entire organization to now it being broken down to individual roles, you have to first of all understand why. First, you have to understand the history. Why don't they even have an appraisal system or a performance management system? And I'll give you one example. I joined an organization whereby performance management or a performance review, I'm talking about the performance management of the entire organization, was seen as a tool to kick out employees. So even by the time I was actually introducing it, I had already understood the history. So what I had to do, I had to change the narrative. And the narrative was, if we don't assess performance, then we are assessing failures. Then I also had to identify key stakeholders who are actually very, very influential in the organization so that I can actually buy into the idea. And with time, one of the aspects I found it also hard was now, because I wanted the problem when you want to achieve so many things at the same time. I found myself trying to introduce even a 360 approach in the organization. And that one was taken a little bit very reluctantly, especially by line managers. They were like, okay, direct reports will say nasty things about it. But as we went on and I showed them the value, because we also aligned it with the competencies in terms of learning and development, it was now embraced. Yeah. I hope I've answered your question.
Good. The next one is there an established way of having a consistent reward system? Is there an established way of having a consistent reward system?
Yes, there is, but also depends with the organization. When you look at reward, for instance, let's say, I'll give an example in terms of compensation and benefits. For instance, let's say you want to, if it's not there, you can actually introduce it, and you want the management to buy in. You can actually even recommend a salary survey to actually benchmark, and you have salary grades. When it comes to now rewards, it has to be very, very clear in terms of what are you seeking to achieve. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in an organization creating an aspect of fairness. So there's no right or wrong answer in terms of that. It's just knowing why you're doing it and how you'll ensure that there's an aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to introducing a reward system to the organization.
But there's one here from Karimi.
Yes.
Karimi says, one question I've been asked by my managers is, that we have been providing feedback throughout the appraisal period. What is the purpose of the appraisal?
Repeat that. I didn't hear well.
Like I think they've been giving feedback throughout. So why do the appraisal? Karemi, you're in the house. I can see Karemi there, but I don't know whether they want to speak. But basically, it looks like the question is, now that we've been giving feedback continually, so why are we doing appraisal? Because we've been giving you feedback. So why are we doing appraisal?
It's just the same way. I think the same way, Esther, when you answer that question is the same way we keep on doing financial reports every day as much as we are recording profits. It's the same way you're doing performance review. There has to be a point whereby, like, for instance, let's say it's very, very important in terms of compliance. Assuming today you want to really build a case for an employee, and for instance, you have not documented that, what happens? What actually does happen? You've given this feedback, for instance, in terms of their performance. Probably you want to put them again on a performance improvement plan. Then you'll have no basis. And that's why I'd actually back to again, if you don't do appraisals, then you have no base in terms of a checkpoint and even a reference point when it comes even to decisions that you have to make about someone. And this is a whole new conversation.
Good. I see another one here from Irene. Irene says, thank you so much. Such great insights and lessons. Meanwhile, how can we get rid of monotony at the appraisal level?
I think that needs also to be specific. Monotony in terms of like doing the same thing the same way, or I hope I get that question clearly.
I think so. So I'm thinking
I also don't get the question.
Yeah, because the next, she also says, how can we make it captivating other than the Q&A way? I think that's it. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, true. That one now has to come from now a point of where now human resource or the people and culture has to now build capacity in terms of giving feedback. So that, as I said, it doesn't become a tell match, but it becomes a more conversational way, and it makes sure that both parties benefit. Because remember, the manager has an agenda, and the appraiser has an agenda, and the appraisee has an agenda. So it's about building capacity in terms of the performance review process, how to give feedback, how to make sure, how to actually, and I remember, I'll give an example. There's one time, as I was introducing a performance management system, one of the things I had to do, I had to train the entire management team. And I had to show them that performance review is a journey. It doesn't end. Sitting down for appraisal, yes, it's good for documentation, but feedback is continuous. How do you give feedback? How do you celebrate someone? How do you give someone, for instance, a constructive feedback that is not very good feedback, or even having tough conversation? How do you do that? That comes from an aspect of capacity building, because this is also an art that you just don't wake up and learn overnight. It has to be the responsibility of HR and even the senior management team to build capacity of the appraisers and the appraisees.
Great. I don't see any other question. Let me just check. Good presentation. Okay. Let me see. Yes. Good presentation. How do we change the mindset of staff from other different departments to stop viewing appraisal as a HR thing, but is essential for the whole organization? I have seen this problem throughout as well.
Yeah,
it's a HR thing. Yeah.
That is, let me tell you, one of the things is you have to be very tactful. And as I said, when I was trying to introduce various performance management systems for the organizations that of course, before I could actually drive in, it was really, really something else. And actually, the philosophy, first of all, when I'm going to the staff, first of all, I tell them performance review is actually your life. So you want to get promoted, you want to really build visibility, then we can't fail, because if we are not assessing you, then it means we are assessing failure. For management, I told them the same way we sit down to look at financials, the same way we sit down. This is important because, I mean, if we've set the objectives and we have the entire organization strategy that has objectives, how do we assess them? So it's being very, very tactful. And also, as I said, there are various aspects that I've actually used in different organizations. Identifying key stakeholders who have really a lot of influence. So when I was doing this, when I was introducing this performance management system, I took key influential people from all levels of the organization. I know this person in this department, and it didn't matter the position. And we even had a performance management committee. And it became a way, like it's, and actually, and I usually say that in any HR, in any organization, if you really want to make a difference, the best way to actually make a difference is through performance management, because it's the cornerstone of everything that HR does, because that's where you're going to identify key talent. That's where you're going to come up with a succession planning. That's the way you're going to get a point of where you can build a talent pool. That's like, it's the corners. It touches everything. And if you have the people who are very, very influential in the organization who can buy in, I'm telling you, you'll just elevate in terms of HR. That's the cornerstone. And that's where you buy them in. And even at times, even during the training, when you're doing even this training, let another person from another department train, and they actually do practicalities. If you're implementing a tool, let them do so that they actually show. By the time you are done 6 months, 1 year, you have already making a difference. Yeah. So that you have to be tactful and also understand how your organization operates. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that one, Eve, for real. Appraisals needs a HR.
Needs a HR.
Maneno ya HR. And unfortunately, some HRs will lose their jobs because of the appraisal of other people. Interesting.
Yeah.
Somehow we end up suffering. Including the top management believes it's a HR thing. Thank you very much. I know Terry is in the house. Terry, would you give us the perspective? Terry Shiundu, give us your perspective from the NGO world. I know some people are asking here. Now, the practicals from the NGO world, what do you look for? What to NGO?
Thank you, Esther, and thank you so much, Eve. I think the presentation was quite comprehensive, and I like the angle you took it from, from us as we do the appraisal. What do we bring? And there's something I remember one of my bosses many years ago when I started in the nonprofit told us and used to keep telling us, if it's not documented, it wasn't done. If it wasn't done, then it cannot be funded. So I think appraisal, performance management is one of those things that we can't just ignore. It is what is showing the impact of what we are doing as an organization. It is what is showing the reason why actually that position exists. Do we need it? And are you the right fit for the role? And that's why we cannot really ignore performance management. And again, just saying, reiterating what you said about being not a HR thing, it's not a people and culture agenda, it's the management. And I think that every time we do appraisal, every year, that is the first slide we start with, that performance management is not a HR thing. It's every supervisor's responsibility, and it's every staff's responsibility to actually show or bring to the table what you're doing. For us, we have the 2 cycles. We have the annual and media performance appraisal, but in addition to that, we have also incorporated CFR. CFR is conversations, feedback, and recognition. This is on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. These are conversations that are ongoing. It's not something you wake up or you wait at the end of the year to give feedback. Because especially in the nonprofit, there are a lot of changes that come with donor requirements, with new funding that comes, in the middle of the year. And you need people to be able to show results at the end of whether it's 3 months, quarterly, or at the end of 6 months. And so sometimes roles keep changing, and that's why those conversations are important. And again, the other aspect that is important, just tying on to the documentation, is really documenting when things are changing along the year, because sometimes when you wait to the mid-year or to the end of the year, you will reach there and you're thinking, okay, what did I achieve? What happened? Because you have had all these things, you've been all over, like what you said, you've been everywhere, but you can't really produce tangible results that this is what I did, because of the changing dynamics of the business and the new donors that are coming on board and the new requirements. So that documentation is extremely important. Have a place you record those conversations. We use Rike as a project management tool, and that's what we use for one-on-ones. And what we have incorporated in the organization is weekly one-on-ones. We are not waiting for mid-year review or end of the year. It is weekly one-on-ones. What's going on? What are we working on? Are we still on track? Are we still on the goals? So those are just things that we incorporate just to ensure that we are still focused on the overall organization priorities, and we are all working towards that, rather than just waiting for an annual performance review that really sometimes is very hallowed, that halo effect, and just thinking of the recency, just the things that happened recently, and you forget everything else that happened in the year. So documenting is very important. I will end there. Thank you so much, Eve. Thank you, Esther.
Wow. Thank you, Terry. I think now you make me feel like we need you on board to speak to the NGO world as well. When you sit here with Eve, you're powerful ladies. We need to I think, have one for the NGO world, specifically. Eve,
yes.
You have an event that I can't afford to forget. Please tell us about it.
Okay. Wow. I think now the fact that I actually had a conversation in terms of the fact that we are always thrown on in terms of things as HR. One of the other things that has been thrown to us is well-being of the organization. So that's the narrative, first of all, we want to change. And we will be having an event on the 25th of November. Let me probably can project it here. The event will purely focus on transitioning from employee well-being to healthy organizations. I think you've seen the link going around. Maybe you can follow our page, Infinite and Culture Solutions. So we are transitioning from employee well-being to healthy organizations. And this is a conversation we are bringing key leaders in the industry, and so that it becomes a conversation for each and every person in the organization, because well-being affects all of us, and we will focus on the root causes. I mean, what are the root causes? Because it's one thing to deal with well-being in terms of, yes, we are taken for checkups review, but what are actually the root causes that actually set us to have mental wellness breakdowns when it comes to our work? So it's going to be a very, very rich conversation. We have industry giants who are going to be keynote speakers. Esther Katiba also, conversation is one of our partners, and we have Harrison Muiru, who's actually a disruptor in the tech space, who's going to be a speaker. We have Philip. We have Philip's pharmaceutical CEO, that's Newton Sele, a talent leader who's also disrupted the pharmaceutical stage. We have the executive director from IHRM, and also we've partnered with IHRM. We have Jen Mutisia. We have a clinical psychiatrist who's also going to be one of the panelists. We have Nicholas Kasithi, who is actually a renowned leader in terms of the global space when it comes to talent management. I mean, it's a powerhouse. And our keynote speaker, who's also Frida Claire, who's really going to be talking about financial health. It's a holistic, because when one area is affected, it affects everyone. And we are looking at it from an organization perspective. And having come 2024, this is going to be an aspect where we carry it, all of it. The same way leaders sit down to come up with the organization strategy, we will have a strategist in the house. Fred Ogola is one of the best strategists we have in this country and across Africa. He actually wrote a book, 10 lessons learned from 1,001 strategic plan. And out of that, we'll be equipped with tools on how you even come up with a strategic well-being and resilience strategy that align with why your organization exists. So this is not a conversation you want to miss, and an opportunity to network, because if you're not well, then what you're having is organization be sick, or we find ourselves it's only HR being left to do. You've talked about appraisals. Now this one has also been thrown to HR. This is the narrative we really want to change. Yeah. So I think someone has said I share the poster. I hope I can get it. Let me see whether I can share this. Maybe Esther, you can share let me just see whether I can share it here. Yes, so that's it. It will be on the 25th of November. Registration is still ongoing. For any person who has attended this workshop and you are actually in senior management, the discount was up to today, the 7.5. After today, we charge it 10,500, because also we look at the rich conversation you are going to carry with. But for any person who has attended this, we'll extend the discount until Friday when you pay. As long as you say that you attended this conversation with Esther Katiba, we'll still extend the 7.5 for you. Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm very passionate about well-being. It's something very close to my heart.
I was going to bargain for my people. I was going to bargain for my people. Terry and the rest in the room, please just make sure you, kindly share on WhatsApp.
Yeah, I'll share that with you. Yes.
If you don't have that poster, maybe
I'm trying to look for it. Let me just give me a minute. I see whether I can trace it. Exit. Yeah, I think I can get. Wait, let me see. And also the link for registration is also there. Alternatively, what I can do is go to LinkedIn and drop you.
Just do this. Share your number. Actually, share your contacts.
Yes.
Chat, and I think they can reach out to you there. I think that will
be easier. It will be easier because someone will say they were part of this. Even it will be easier to give these discounts. Yes.
Yes, I think that.
All right.
I think you sent that message to me alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone. Yeah, that's my number.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, now it's there now. So pick the number from there. Enjoy the discount. Let's meet there. I will be right there. This one I cannot miss. I am very passionate about mental health and mental wellness. You know that very well. So asante sana, Eve. Thank you everybody for joining us. Eve, thank you. There were a lot of comments saying thank you. It is informative. And you can keep getting this. It's on our YouTube. So keep watching there and remember to subscribe to our YouTube. Then you can get much more. Thank you, Eve. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night and God bless you. Bye-bye.